Today, our panel of experts is going to cover a lot of ground, discussing technical and operational changes on both sides of the live newscast. We'll examine the latest in studio presentation technology, as well as recent developments in field production and contribution workflows. And joining me are Eric Smith, VP of News Operations and Technology for Fox Television Stations, Steve Festuc, SVP of Technical and Commercial Operations for CNBC, Clint Moore, Director of Broadcast Operations for Gray Television, and down at the end, Ernie Ensign, AVP of News Technology and Operations for Sinclair. And as I always suggest, we'd like to make this interactive, so if you have questions, please come up to the mic towards the end, and we'll get to you. I'd like to start with Steve, because Steve's got some news this week in terms of studio presentation. Can you talk about what CNBC's done with its graphics package and the rebrand, et cetera?
Thanks. So this actually started back in 2020 when we built our what we call Studio B, and it was the first time that we'd ever really integrated high-density LED displays and scenery. And so we have a tricky job, right? So we have to take highly detailed financial information, and we have to boil it down into a consumable, elegant way that people like you and I can consume. And so that's tricky. So what it requires us to do is have a lot of things. We have to have exact data, so speed is really, really important. Quality is really important. We can't just have a sloppy screen that you can't read the chart, because the chart is what you're making money on. We also have a ton of contributors on our network, high-end traders that do what they do every day. So that was the beginning, and we built that studio. It has moving monitors. The monitors come close to the talent. It surrounds you with information. And if we have people that are not there, because a lot of our traders are actually trading, so they can't just come and sit on set, we can bring those traders back to you live. So that was like step one. Then a year later, a year ago in July, we brought that same technology to the New York Stock Exchange. We built a set for Mad Money and Jim Cramer. And then in September, we launched the very same thing with our good partners at the NASDAQ. And the NASDAQ studio is in Times Square, and Zev Nicole is in the back there, I happen to see. Amazing partnership. It's a half-round studio, and we built tracking 1.3 millimeter LCD displays. So that show is at 5 p.m. It's called Fast Money. It's hosted by a regular host, and the people that contribute are active day traders. So sometimes they're in Times Square, but sometimes they're in their trading floor. So if they're in their trading floor, we roll the monitors around, and guess what? They're on set. So the conversations are natural, meaningful, and rich. And then yesterday, we launched our graphics redesign yesterday morning. The last time we did a redesign was about 10 years ago. It's an elegant, consumable product. Again, like I said, our job is to boil down very detailed technical information into a consumable form. So we want it to be elegant, rich, bold, and by the way, we also have to be seen on all kinds of screens, and it has to be very easily consumable on your phone or on television. And so we launched that yesterday with great success. And while we did that, just because we didn't have anything else to do, we decided to change the platform and the user system. So for us, we use graphics. Tons and tons of graphics. We have self-service tools. I'm sure many of you have self-service tools. But our self-service tool is extremely complex. I can build a chart of stock A versus stock B, and if I don't like the period of that chart, because it doesn't tell the story, I can change it. Every time we do that, it goes to our data pool. Our data pool has 1 billion transactions a day that come into our data pool. So those are all computed, presented by editorial folks in a very elegant, sophisticated way.
Can you talk about the data cube in terms of representation of what's going on in the market?
Yeah, so our redesign started out with a box. And we said, the box is the source of all things, right? So graphically, so a box can be sliced in half, which can be an up arrow or a down arrow. It can be shown, it can be rotated, and you can look at it from all sides. So we love to show information based on other information, right? So if the Dow is down 1,000 points, we want to be able to turn that box and say, what drove it? Here are the top drivers. And then go into that box and find out what happened in those top 10 drivers. So it's all about presenting data in an elegant and beautiful fashion. And this is where AR and high-quality LCD screens are everything. Like, it's revolutionized everything we do. I don't think I'll ever put a brand on a set again. Right now I have one brand on one desk left, and it's the CNBC Peacock. Everything else is completely electronic because the screens are affordable. They're configurable because the form factor is small, so I can curve them. I can make strips. I can make them vertical, horizontal. And they're really amazing. It's really, really amazing stuff.
And how do you see that evolving? I mean, have you done true virtual production like, we've seen with entertainment, The Mandalorian, whatever, where you have an LED actually be a photorealistic backdrop?
Yes. So what we want to do, we want to have those things do something that matters to our consumers. So if I can, and we do use AR. We use Brainstorm. We have a couple of different mechanisms for talent interacting with those pieces. Those pieces have to tell a story. And so if I want to look at a stock and I want it to come up next to me because that's an easier way for me to present because I can keep my eyes focused, that's a win. And so now the next step will be to take those beautiful LED displays, take the matting, take the capability. By the way, the reason we don't use the matting a lot with our guests is because of the delay. It makes the conversation too jumpy. And people trade on our content within seconds. They literally trade on our content in seconds. So we can't have delays. Everything has to be, and this is where when we get into the connectivity conversation, everything has to be fast. And so by doing that, we use real displays for the fastest stuff. We use augmented reality to bring things back to you in person.
Okay, thanks. Eric, are the Fox stations experimenting with any new technology in their studio presentation?
Yeah, we are. We have two stations that are kind of taking the lead for our group. It's kind of interesting, the fireside chat earlier about the last frontier being local TV stations in XR and AR. I think that really is the reality, and I think we're going to talk about some of the challenges and why that is the reality later. But our station in Washington, WTTG, and then also our station in Atlanta, WAGA, are both kind of taking the lead for our group. And, we're, really, and I know the other station groups are as well, but we are a live-based company. WTTG, as an example, is doing over 15 hours of live linear content a day. Clearly, we're trying to support Fox Local and some of our other initiatives across our company in the digital space. And so we need flexibility in our studios. We want to, once again, create compelling storytelling opportunities across all of those platforms. So WTTG, we have a hub and spoke approach from a graphics perspective at FTS. So we're a Chiron company. And so WTTG is invested in the Chiron VSAR product, which is built on the Unreal platform like most of the other players are. And there's obvious reasons why that makes sense for us because it already works with our existing infrastructure in that Chiron ecosystem. WAGA is taking a little bit of a different approach. They're focused on augmented reality right now, specifically the weather company's Max Reality. So neither system is up and running yet, but they're both kind of in the process of getting their systems set up and trying to take advantage of what they have to offer.
Well, and I'll follow up right now. When you look at doing more AR graphics at the call letter level, what are some of the big challenges with using tools like Unreal on a scale basis?
Yeah, I think it's what we all know. So once again, in our hub and spoke approach, we have phenomenal artists, and we have a local artist at each of our stations, but do they necessarily have the skill set for 3D modeling and the things that come with Unreal specifically? And, I think one of the things that, yes, there are a lot of folks out there that you can contract with to do Unreal work, Unreal building of models and everything. But I do think there is most definitely a distinction between someone that knows Unreal more from a gaming perspective than someone that actually knows Unreal from a broadcast perspective. And then all the things that have to work in our environments, has to work with our NRCS, has to work with our automation systems, has to be MOSC, connected. So, there's all these other things that, yes, even if you know Unreal and yes, there's tutorials, it really is about, getting the right human resources to support the content because you don't want to farm it all out. You want to be able to build it in-house and keep it close. And so that's a challenge that we continue to work through, and it'll continue to grow, and there'll be more opportunities, and there'll be more folks that can support that, but that's a challenge right now.
Steve talked about how much physical stuff on sets is going away and is getting, replaced with displays or AR elements to illustrate things. Are you seeing some of the old line set designers, guys who have done hard set designs for decades, are they starting to, provide some of these services in a virtual environment?
Yeah, I think, we work with some different set designers across our group. That's not one of the things that we've standardized on, so the stations get to decide who they're going to work with. I think they're all trying to figure out their space in that as well. I think some are a little bit ahead of others. But I think, with the investment that we're making with those vendors, clearly, as we move forward and as we want to be in that space, it needs to be something that it's a primary focus, I think, for them and to help support us. And, once again, not to be repetitive, but it's the last frontier for local TV for a reason. We all want to be there. We see the value in it. We want to create more content. But once again, the actual, taking that next step and having the support we need can really, they could really help us with that.
Okay, thanks. Clint, can you talk about how IP-based production tools have given Gray new flexibility in how its personnel produce local daily news?
Sure. The challenge for us is attracting quality employees and keeping them on the payroll. And a lot of what we've done before, we've all got the IP-based infrastructure in to get content in from the field. I mean, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's something that we do every day, and everybody knows how to do it. So we kind of took a little spin. After 2020, you've got a large group of people now that really prefer to work from home. And while there's a big debate about that, do we or do we not let them work from home, we had a couple of stations that kind of embraced that. And they've got producers that work for them that turn shows daily, and they don't even live in the same city. In some situations, they live states and time codes away, or not time codes, time zones away. So we kind of looked at that on a corporate level too, and we said, well, how can we help these stations? Because, a lot of stations are struggling. They're always recruiting. They need help from a corporate level. And so we created a group that is a group of corporate employees, they're remote news producers, and they work from home. There's 12 of these folks, and they work in different time zones. Each of them have a group of stations in the time zone that they live in, and it's become very beneficial for those stations because now you've got help. So if somebody calls in sick or somebody goes out on maternity leave or vacation, instead of having to take the employees that you have and working them to death, especially if you're already down 2 or 3 employees, you've got this other resource to pull from to help you to produce newscasts. We've had one of those producers that has, won an Emmy Award for her work from home as a remote news producer. So that's been really helpful for us, and the stations have really appreciated it. And it allows us to attract, a higher caliber of employee because you get somebody that's highly qualified that can live where they want to live and still produce news. Sometimes they do a complete newscast. Sometimes they're just an associate producer for the day and just help out. It's worked out really well for us, and we rely a lot on the stations. We have a plan put out there where the employee has a certain, footprint of equipment at their home, and then the station has to provide the rest of it so they can get in. But we've been very happy with it. We got a lot of positive feedback about it, and those folks are turning a lot of hours per week of news.
Turning to directing side, I know Gray's been a user of production automation systems, for years. Do you have anyone directing newscasts remotely today?
Absolutely, yes. When 2020 hit, we immediately, in our stations that were automated, were able to produce, or not only send the reporters and the producers home, but also the directors. So we had situations where we've got, people from different places producing the show, directors directing from at home on their couch. We provided them with everything they need. We have a lot of stations that still do that today. Some have brought them back in, some, still have them out in the field, and some have the ability to let them, direct from home if need be again. So that's worked out very well for us. Directing at home is a little bit more trickier because of all the stuff you have access to, but, and now, a situation where in an automated, control room, if we had anywhere from 2 to 4 people in there for a newscast, Now you can just have one person at the station kind of watching everything, making sure that everything's doing what it's supposed to. All these other people working remotely to produce and direct from home, and it's worked out really well.
Okay, thanks. By the way, can everyone hear us well? Okay, good. Nice. These guys listened. Ernie, I know Sinclair's been experimenting with using the cloud for news production over the past year. How is that work progressing?
There are two areas that we've really been focused on related to cloud production. The first one is what my colleague Mike Palmer referred to earlier, sort of the camera to cloud workflows. And the idea there is, having access to content as quickly as possible and moving us into this mindset of gather, report, with all of the, content consumption that happens every day. We can't wait for a story to be produced, have a photographer edit in the field and send it back in. So the mindset is get content in as fast as possible with metadata. We've got the assignment queue from within the newsroom that is linked to the cameras so that they can label the story and send that back. Stations have embraced it. And I think, we're going to expand it further next year. I think the challenges are there's some workflow overlap. We have bonded cellular devices that can send content back immediately as fast as possible. But the problem with that is that it's not every piece of content. It's selective. And I think, we want to be in this world where any piece of content is pretty much available almost in real time. There's speed of light issues that it can't be, exactly immediate. And I think where that has mostly broke down is in the connectivity piece. And we've had, many conversations with a bunch of different, cellular providers and how to make that more robust. We are now beginning to experiment with LiveView with, using the power of a smaller bonded cellular device that has multiple modems to get that content back faster. So it's a work in progress, and I think as the codecs in the cameras get better, so we can increase the quality and reduce the bit rate, I think that's just going to further improve those workflows. And then the other area that we're exploring related to cloud production is we're trying to take all of these remote productions that we do, the debates, the parades, the town halls, anything that is not necessarily a daily newscast. I'm not sure cloud is completely ready for 16 hours of live news a day, and I'm not sure the business models completely work, but certainly all of these other types of productions where we roll the production truck, the setup and the tear down, take a lot of time and effort and energy and engineering resources. We think that there's some better ways and better tools out there to, turn those more into cloud-related productions. And, those so far have been very successful, and, we've got good engagement and good embracement from our newsrooms.
I want to follow up you when you mentioned that connectivity still remains the big challenge. Is it latency that you're trying to tackle, or is it just having reliable connectivity in all the places where you would be reporting and shooting from?
It's the reliability piece. You can't build a workflow and it only works some of the time. It's got to be fairly resilient. And I think each of the cell providers has a different strategy on whether they're, trying to target bandwidth or, a more blanketed coverage across the country. I think we certainly see there's some other workflows that can be enabled by immediately getting your content into the cloud. And instead of, downloading that content now to a laptop and editing and send it back, well, now I just jump into the cloud and start the edit process. But that doesn't work if, you don't have fairly robust connectivity. Our RF properties are what they are. And, if you get into, out in the, whether there's dips in the terrain or if you're out in the middle of nowhere, we need a strategy to deal with those types of situations.
Okay, thanks. Eric, has the Fox Group experimented at all with cloud-based news production?
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting because cloud production, you could define it in a lot of different ways, right?
It's a fungible term.
Yeah, exactly. So similarly to what Ernie just described with what they're doing with Sony and the camera to cloud, we are working with LiveView right now on a POC for their ingest system. So we're evaluating ingest, and you know, similarly to what Ernie said, you know, the magic of that for us is that it gets the metadata from the NRCS. It flows through the LiveView ecosystem, which is how we do almost all of our field contribution. And then ultimately, we use BitCentral for our MAM, and the idea is that that metadata flows all the way back through into the MAM, and so that we have that, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about metadata earlier in the day.
Yes.
So trying to bring that through and make it easily searchable. So, you know, we're certainly in that space right now, and then more, I guess, traditionally what you would call cloud production. We've evaluated, you know, cloud production switchers, you know, that could possibly be full control room replacements, but also I think we're focusing right now, I think, is more on digital properties, pop-up events, things that we could do, you know, whether it be an election special or an NFL special when maybe we don't want to use an entire control room or our control rooms, because once again, our stations are doing, you know, 12, 15, 16 hours of live linear content a day. We want to be on digital. We want to support our Fox Local and our FAST channels, and some of those cloud production tools that you can spin up and use on an as-needed basis kind of really fit that model for us. You know, and we've looked at multiple vendors on that. Our digital team right now is using TVU Channel to program our digital streams. They're using TVU Producer for some of that live now content that Jeff Zelmer mentioned earlier. We're also, we've done some testing with LiveView Studio at a few of our stations in Dallas and Minneapolis, and, you know, our friends at Gravio too. So we're kind of evaluating everything, but we definitely want to be in that space. And, you know, once again, agreed. I don't think the business model supports, you know, 12 to 14 or 16 hours of cloud production a day. But, you know, an hour here, a few hours there, or even as a disaster recovery kind of business continuity solution, it can work.
Yeah, Ernie, if you had no connectivity concerns, are the cloud-based switchers that are available in the market, I know you guys have tested several, are they reliable enough to really be your production control room in the cloud for your 5 o'clock newscast?
I think it's pretty close. I think where the deficiencies are is in some of the interoperability and connecting some of the other components. If you were just doing video in the cloud, you could do it tomorrow, but it's when you start adding, you know, complex audio and intercom and now you've got to get that from the cloud to the ground and back and forth. I think that's where it needs to mature, but, you know, I think the technology was you know, pretty robust. I think you'd have to, you know, if you centralized operations and you could sort of bring all that together, I think some of that would be much easier to orchestrate across, especially an organization like Sinclair with 70 news producing stations across the country. You know, it's a lot to try to orchestrate. So I think we would need to look at, you know, centralizing operations to make it work a little bit more elegantly. And certainly I think, you know, we can probably extract more value out of some of our media workflows in newsrooms. So I think that's our next big piece to tackle and let some of the, you know, cloud-based technology mature a little bit as we look at some of these edge cases, the town halls, the parades, and things like that.
Okay, fair enough. Clint, have you played around with cloud production at Gray at all?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's, you know, like everyone here has said, there's so many possibilities. For us, it's more of a hybrid solution. You know, we're not going to jump all in on the cloud right away. It's just, it's too risky. We have a lot of stations in the footprint of the area along the coast and the Gulf. And for those stations, it's not if you lose connectivity, it's when. And so we have to be, you know, very, you know, we have to think about that. So a lot of times when we're testing these cloud products and, you know, we get together and we test them in a perfect environment and they're plugged in and everything's great, but the real test is when you go down to McDonald's and see if you can do it there, you know, because let's get, you know, reality, that's where your crews are going to be doing it. So it's been good for us, and I think one of the things that has really benefited us also is the fact that Gray has grown very quickly over the past 5 years, where Gray purchased Raycom and then Quincy and then Meredith. And so for us on the corporate team, we had the opportunity to see what other groups were doing as we brought them into the group. And then we could pick and choose what worked really well. And because of that, we've got multiple vendors that we're doing this with. And so, we're really happy with it. I agree we're not ready to go full board to the cloud yet, but there's a lot of stuff that is, that we can absolutely rely on the cloud for.
Fair enough. Steve, is the cloud anything you've played with at CNBC?
Yeah, so, it's just like you guys are saying, we're not putting our primary broadcasts in there yet. But we have an events business, and we're doing our events business almost completely through cloud control. So so we go to an event, we get a ballroom like this, and we invite investors, and they come. But then we realized during COVID, this is also an opportunity for people to subscribe to the product. So now we have a subscription service. So now I can send somebody to an event like this to sit at a table over there, but instead of having hardware, they've got a PC with some connectivity, and they're switching through a cloud control. So we have a couple cameras in the house, we have guests and Zooms all over the country, and we've brought a performance to reality, so without any hardware. So that's where really where we've dabbled in it the most.
Okay, fair enough. Eric, you mentioned before how much you guys use bonded cell for news gathering. Are there any other new technologies you're looking at for field contribution, or anything else new there from application point of view?
Well, I wouldn't say new, but we continue to advance and see what we can do to move forward with some of these things. Clearly, there's been talk, whether it be a debate or a town hall or a parade or any of these special events, being able to do REMI remotes, taking advantage of multi-camera units like an LU800, but, really it still, comes back to, for those events, both latency and reliability. We certainly have started to use some Starlink technology. We talked about that on last year's panel.
As we get started.
Yeah, we were just starting, and we've advanced some of that, and it fits in. It's another tool in the toolbox. It goes along with everything else that we use. It's not, it's not the game changer in and of itself, but it can definitely be another tool in the toolbox to help support our teams, and potentially. With low Earth orbit satellite, there's opportunities to use different classes of service. So maybe what you're paying for at a day-to-day news gathering level, you could live with the consumer service, so to speak, as
Right.
opposed to, taking it up to the, more of a quality of service approach and paying for that. So I think it depends on the application.
What is the cost comparison in adding Starlink to a news truck? I know you have a lot of news trucks that are cellular based, but compared to Ka band satellite, for example, or traditional Ku.
I think it's very reasonable. I mean, the hardware is certainly cheaper. There's no question about that, as opposed to putting a 1.2 meter dish on the top of a truck.
Right.
And then once again, it comes back to what level of service can you live with, and or are you comfortable with. At that consumer-based level, it's incredibly affordable, certainly less than what potentially KUIP or KAIP would do.
And I'd like to add ease of use also. Back when you got a dish on the truck, you got to have somebody to drive it.
Yeah.
Right.
And he can only drive so many hours a day, and he's got to sleep someplace. And now you got these kits you can send out with your field crews, and you can train them on how to operate it. So the ease of use, it takes a big chunk out of that cost of operation.
Have you seen the coverage improve with Starlink? 'Cause I remember that was something we discussed last year. There were certain areas of the country where there wasn't very good coverage.
We have 17 news producing stations all over the country in some of the biggest markets, and we have not seen any issues in terms of coverage. Now, we're not in some of the smaller markets and some of those places in maybe the Midwest or some of the places that maybe have had some connectivity issues, so I can't speak directly from our perspective, but in terms of where we are located and what we're using it for, we haven't had any issues.
Okay. Ernie, how much of an impact has 5G had on your news gathering operations to date?
I think we've seen improvements there. I don't think it's game changing, but certainly in larger metropolitan areas, we've seen big bandwidth improvements. Again, we have different asks than I think the normal consumer. We're looking for the largest bandwidth upload speeds that we can get, especially in our camera to cloud cloud workflows, and we're looking for blanketed coverage. We don't necessarily want to be in a metropolitan area all the time. We've expanded our modems in our LiveView devices up to 8 modems, those 2 being 5G. We've had numerous conversations on network slicing. We're never going to be in a position where we're going to be able to go out and buy a big network slice from one of the providers, but certainly if they're amenable to, carving off a slice for the media and entertainment industry, and, that traffic can be tagged and prioritized, that has some benefits. I mean, it will hopefully move the needle enough that you get into large-scale stadium events that, a lot of us do, or just in big, protests in some of the large metropolitan areas where you've got, huge numbers of people. And I think there's vendors willing to, have those discussions and move that direction. Has to be, 5G standalone has to be supported. So any of you, LiveView and those will have to work with us on that. But I think if we can get there, I think that could be some huge benefits and may even negate some of the Starlink and needing those types of devices, because Starlink did save us at an Ohio State football game I don't know, a couple of months ago, and we had very limited bandwidth from where we were, and the Starlink was the difference in still getting on the air. So.
Okay, yeah, and by 5G standalone, just my understanding of it is that's where the whole network, the core network, is actually truly 5G. A lot of 5G now, maybe it's 5G at the receiver, but it's still using an LTE backbone, and then you can't do slicing and that kind of stuff. What about the other thing you could do with 5G is do a private 5G network? Get some spectrum approval from the FCC, lease it on a temporary basis, and set up your own transmitters. Is that something you guys have looked at for big event coverage?
Certainly, we're interested in it. Similarly to what Ernie said, we're talking to the cellular providers, and they talk about slicing and private network, and we're starting to see the private network thing become a reality to some degree. We certainly haven't had the opportunity to test it or use it yet, but it could potentially be a game changer for the reasons that we've just talked about. So absolutely interested. If all the big carriers are listening, bring it on. We're ready. We know we've been having a lot of conversations, but let's do something.
Following up on that, 2024 election, obviously a lot of big events. What coverage plans do you already have in place? You've got a couple stations in Milwaukee and Chicago who are having political conventions right in town. Can you talk about what those plans are right now and how it maybe compares to the last cycle?
Yeah, it's interesting because the last cycle, obviously, as we all know, was 2016, since the conventions were canceled in 2020. So certainly there's been just a little bit of technological advancement in the last 7 or 8 years. We're in the early stages. Our 2 stations, as you said, in Milwaukee and Chicago are host cities, and they're planning on really putting their best foot forward and producing a lot of content from the venues. And I think certainly the path forward, while no decisions have been made yet, is not to do pull fiber through a building and deal with all of those costs. I mean, most definitely we're looking at IP-based transmission and everything else that goes with that. So more to finalize there, but most definitely probably taking advantage of the LiveView ecosystem that we have with guaranteed internet.
Okay, yeah, and Clint or Ernie, any you want to weigh in on that at all? How much it's changed maybe since I mean, even just from 2020 till now, the amount of change in terms of IP connectivity is fairly dramatic. Cellular's been around for a while.
Yeah, I think we'll leverage our existing devices, and we've got a network of journalists all across Sinclair, that are sort of the boots on the ground that can go to any convention, get access to any political event. We'll leverage a lot of our streaming tools to provide all of the various streams that may be available from either the conventions or some of the political parties that may be hosting events, and we'll provide that across the Sinclair network. We've got a team of 4 reporters and a 10-person staff in DC that will help fill in the gaps that if we can't be necessarily local at a a convention or on location, they certainly can provide. They're the experts, and then they can provide context to what's going on the political side of things. So
Yeah, you have to prove to the staff it's going to work also, because you have newsrooms that are very nervous when they hear that you're going to go cover a major event and not roll a trailer or a truck. You're going to send 3 people in with a couple of backpacks and some cameras. And we, a couple months ago, we had a situation in Atlanta where we kind of had, we had our trailer there, but we told our team there, hey, let's really work with the backpacks and just kind of have the trailer as a backup. And they did, and then they saw the benefit of it, and they're like, yeah, we don't ever want to roll a trailer again. So, you got these guys out in the field, and the crew's out there, and at the end of the day, let's all face it, if the shot's not up, in the heat of the moment, they're the one getting screamed at. So they want to make sure that what they have is going to be reliable, so that, they know they can feed back and give the station and the management team what they're looking for. So making sure that the crews understand that, technology has finally gotten to the point where we don't need to pull 1,000 feet of cable to a truck that's manned with 5 people anymore is something that we can do.
And I think the other thing too, I'm sorry, just, we're talking about transmission, but, other lessons learned, Clint mentioned it earlier, the lessons learned about COVID. I mean, some of the things that came out of COVID, like, in 2016, it was incredibly difficult to get teleprompter on a remote site easily, without a lot of, back-end work, low latency video return, for confidence monitoring, all the things that we couldn't do then. Now, we certainly, if we didn't solve it by 2020, we did after COVID or during COVID. And so, it's going to benefit our production teams that are on those sites at the conventions, taking advantage of all the lessons that we learned.
Okay, thanks. Well, I see Mike Palmer in the back of the room. He's just waiting for me to talk about metadata. He's been glaring at me. We haven't talked about metadata in a while. Steve, can you talk about how CNBC actively uses metadata to present the day's financial news?
Yeah.
Machine.
Yeah, so for us, metadata, so for us, right, our content is forever, and it's highly valuable, but it needs to be detailed. We have to have very, very detailed metadata, because we have to know exactly when it happened and what happened, right? So we all have the same tools available to us. We have visual recognition, we have character recognition, we have oral recognition, text recognition, and they're all in the 80s, 90% accuracy range, right? We can't have people invest on 80 or 90% accuracy. So we need 99% accuracy for our things. So in 2017, we launched a project to take all of these things and triangulate them together and cross-compare them to time code. And we use our systems so every time you push a button in a CNBC facility, you're creating a metadata point. At 12:59:52, I just took a shot of Kelly, one of our anchors, right? And that anchor had a lower third under that said this, and then we talked to this CEO and that CEO, and by the way, our billion stock transactions, here's what happened on the market. So all of that data is sitting there. So what we've done, and we've actually got 2 patents on this, we're triangulating all that data to enrich the metadata on that content. So in the future, so we got that, right? It's kind of built now. And the next part, the good part, is now being able to take that metadata and do stuff with it. So the first thing we're going to do, right, when we create our content, it's kind of subjective, right? We have really smart people. By the way, our goal is never to get rid of smart people. It's actually to enhance smart people. Our reporters, our producers, our editors, our correspondents, these folks are highly intelligent financial professionals. So I need them, and our investors need them. But what we can do by using this tool, imagine coming to work and you're getting ready to produce your show. So today you read the Wall Street Journal and maybe the Times and you heard what was going on the wires. I picked this story and picked that story. In the future, you're going to do that, but you're also going to come to work and say, good morning. The AI engine is going to know the personality of your show. It's going to know the time frame of your show. And for us, time frame is very important, right? Pre-market is different than during the market open. Aftermarket is very different. We have different personalities. Some shows want to kind of talk about how to use your money. Some of them talk about how to make more money. Some of them help you pick stocks, right? We have a very different program. It's going to know that. Then what it's going to do is say, okay, based on all of these things and based on all of our history for 30 years, we're going to put all this together and say, you know, today, if you want to do this, you ought to do this, this, and that as a subset, right? How many of you guys have had Amazon and you buy something that says, you know, if you need that, you probably got to get the power cord for it too. Imagine that in your editorial content, being able to have something that, and by the way, if you don't want it, don't check it. So AI is not going to take away and make decisions for us. It's going to do all the groundwork. It's going to do all the heavy lifting and let you come in and really then totally relieve yourselves of anything. And we've been doing this for years. We took out, when we built our facility in 2003, we took out technical work from producers. You didn't have to know REM 523 to get a remote on. All you had to know is it was Washington, and I want a correspondent in Washington. We've been doing that, and this is the next step in that evolution.
Okay, thanks. Eric, you know, your colleague Ben Ramos was talking about using AI to help manage your archive and digitize it. How do you see AI being used as a production tool for your journalists?
There's so many opportunities and options. You know, we have an AI task force in our station group that is cross-division as well. It's not just a station group. And, you know, we understand the risks and some of the inherent dangers that come with AI, as has been discussed in this room before, but also, you know, an incredible opportunity for efficiency tools. As I said, you know, we're creating more and more content, both linearly and digitally. We need to give our staff, our teams, the ability to create more content, better content, take away those menial tasks, and I think there's a real opportunity for AI. You know, we're looking at some things, working with a company called Magnify. Some of you may know them. They're in the AI sports highlights space. Mm-hmm. You know, so a great example, at a lot of local television stations, sports departments have either been gutted or they're gone or they're certainly reduced from what they used to be. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you can, you know, relieve the pressure of a sports producer having to log 3 NFL games on a Sunday afternoon to then let them create the content. That's just an example, you know. Now they can just go, it's already found, you know, the touchdowns, the sacks, you can search by the player, you know, whatever. So it's a good example of that kind of efficiency tool that we're looking for. And then obviously, you know, as was already discussed, you know, a lot of the Fox Archive project is FTS content. And so we are very much interested in getting that metadata enriched and being able to search it and find it easily.
Okay. Then we have any questions from the audience? Please, guys, we're coming up close to the end of our time. Here we go.
Yeah, just a question for Clint. You mentioned that some stations, the directors come back, and some they still at home. What's driving that decision?
It's really up to the stations and the market that they're in. I mean, it's up to the general managers and the news directors. You know, if some want to have their folks back in and some still see the benefit of having folks remote, and some see the benefit of offering that remote as an option if they need it.
So it's more of a local...
Yeah, it's more of a local decision. Absolutely, yes.
And it's really more about talent recruitment and retention than any
Absolutely.
health concerns or anything.
Yeah, you know, if you've got a group of directors and you tell a group of directors, you know, hey, we've got 6 directors and such is going to be on vacation. I need somebody to cover them on Saturday. Can you cover them if you do it from home? That's a big driving benefit for that director to say, yeah. So we have stations that do that.
It also opens up the talent pool. I mean, there's so many more people that you can get, so much more geographic diversity that you can get if you can open that up.
Yeah.
Okay. We've come to the end of our time. I want to thank the audience for their attention. Thank my panelists for covering a lot of ground very eloquently. And wish you all a good afternoon.
Thank you.